Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating historical and religious text that makes a pretty bold claim. It argues that someone incredibly famous actually understands exactly what it feels like to be you right now. Today, we're unpacking a document titled Our Great Exemplar. Now, whether you're intimately familiar with these texts or you're just curious about the historical and philosophical ideas they present, the way this source breaks down the human experience is absolutely captivating. It paints a picture not of some untouchable figure floating on a cloud, but of someone who is intimately familiar with the everyday grit of human life.
Let's be completely real for a second. Growing up, or just being a person in general, can be really hard. You probably deal with frustrating, exhausting, and just straight up confusing feelings every single day. Have you ever felt physically drained, completely sad, or maybe just totally annoyed by the people around you? Well, the source material doesn't shy away from these realities at all. In fact, it uses these exact relatable feelings as the foundation for its entire argument.
And that brings us to Section 1, Just Like You. Let's look at how the text describes him stepping into those exact same difficult feelings. This source text calls Jesus Christ the apostle and high priest of our profession and our great exemplar. Now, exemplar is a fantastic word. It simply means a perfect example to follow. Think of it kind of like the ultimate team captain, right? A truly great team captain isn't someone who just sits on the sidelines in a perfectly clean uniform shouting orders at you. A real captain is out there on the field, getting muddy, taking the hits, and facing the exact same opposing team that you are. That is the specific framework this text uses. Check out this quote from Hebrews 2:17. It says, "He was made like unto his brethren." The author is explaining that Jesus actually subjected himself to humanity on purpose. And why? So he could become intimately acquainted with all the temptations and sorrows we face. He didn't use some cheat code to bypass the human experience, the source argues. He dove right into it, taking on the exact same frailties and everyday struggles that we carry around. Let's move right into Section 2. He felt what you feel, and see how the text builds a bridge between your daily life and his. The text brilliantly sets up a side-by-side comparison. On one hand, you have your life, a tired body, a confused mind, moments of sadness, happiness, and of course, temptation. But then the text outlines his life. It says his body was susceptible to weariness, his mind could be perplexed, which actually means harassed and confused. He felt real grief, he felt real joy, and he was genuinely tempted. It completely shatters the idea of an untouchable superhero, showing instead someone who walked your exact path. The text gets highly specific about where these hardships came from, too. If you have hardships, well, so did he. The author notes that he faced actual temptations from Satan and real annoyances from his enemies. Just think about that word for a second, annoy. It's such an everyday, perfectly human experience. He wasn't living in a protective bubble. He dealt with difficult, annoying people and external pressures just like the ones that cause you stress right now. So the crucial point here is understanding what he was like at your age. Let's look at Section 3, when Jesus was 10. The source flat out states Jesus once stood an age just where you now stand. That is such a powerful concept. The author stresses that he had your exact circumstances. The text uses this great old-fashioned word here, cogitations. It says he had your cogitations, which, let's be honest, is just a fancy word for your deep thoughts, your worries, and your overthinking during this very critical period of your life. He didn't just magically skip from being a baby in a manger to being a 30-year-old teacher. He was a kid. He was a teenager. He navigated all those confusing, awkward years. The author maps out his timeline really clearly, starting as a baby born into humanity, moving to a kid growing up and running around the hills of Judea, and finally becoming a strong man in his prime. The text emphasizes that Jesus isn't just revealed to us as some old man bending under the pressure of age. He grew up, step by step, experiencing the very real physical and mental development of youth, just like you are. During his childhood, which the text calls a time of comparative obscurity, meaning a quiet, normal life totally out of the spotlight, he was actually laying the foundation for a sharp mind and a healthy, strong body, or a sound constitution. There's a quote here from Luke chapter 1 saying, "He grew and waxed strong in spirit." The author really wants us to grasp that this obscure, everyday period of growing up is a vital, meaningful part of the human experience that Jesus fully participated in. Because he lived through literally all of this, the text argues he earned a very specific title. Here's Section 4, the perfect team captain. The text explains that he became the captain of our salvation specifically through suffering. To prove that he understands our worst days, the author points to the absolute extremes of his life. The ruling powers tortured his body, and the soldiers crucified him. He faced the absolute worst that enemies could possibly do to a person. And the logic here is incredibly profound. Because he endured the absolute maximum of human suffering, there is literally no lesser hardship, no minor annoyance, and no pain that we face today that he doesn't completely understand. But here is where the exemplar part really comes into focus. Even though the text makes it clear he felt the burden just as heavily as any of us do, the author outlines exactly why he's presented as the perfect team captain. Basically, he bore it better. How? Well, the text lists 4 specific ways: without complaint, without impatience, without unbelief, and without repining. Scratch that last word if you don't know it. Repining just basically means fretting or whining. The author is super careful to note that his lack of complaining doesn't mean he felt the pain any less. It just means he managed it perfectly, setting the ultimate gold standard for us to follow. Let's bring this all together in section 5. Follow his example, and see why this ancient text matters so much for your life today. Because Jesus is intimately acquainted with your specific temptations, and because he remembers the exact spot where you stand in life right now, the text concludes with a highly personal promise. It says he cannot overlook you at this critical period. He sees your dangers. The author is reassuring you that because of his lived, messy human experience, his attention and empathy toward you are absolutely complete. Which leaves us with the final challenge presented by the source text. He's warmly inviting you to follow his example. And remember, he isn't asking you to follow from a distance. He's asking you to follow someone who has literally walked the exact same muddy field you're on right now. So the question this explainer leaves you to chew on today is this: will you choose to follow the exemplar who perfectly understands exactly what you are going through? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep seeking out those perfect examples in your own life.